Hello, I'm Jackie Jones of Jones & Associates Law PC, your family fixer. And I'm so glad to be here to talk with you today about your custody case during the coronavirus or COVID-19 crisis. Now, I don't want to seem like I'm jumping on the bandwagon, but I am ready and able to talk about this for a couple of reasons. One, I have two children who are now in public school, which means they are exposed to a lot of things. But in addition to my children attending public school, I am a member of the school board. So unlike some people who only hear the information when it comes out, I'm actually part of the decision-making process and part of the source that gets early information about what we're going to be doing. So for instance, kids around our county are closed for school today. We had what was called an Act 80 half day that became a full day, where instead of the teachers doing their Act 80, which is their sort of education for that part of the day, they are doing the beginning planning in case the school districts need to close. As I speak, the superintendents from around our county are also in the midst of closing, not necessarily closing, but meeting during the closures so that they can prepare for what to do in case of emergencies. Now, for the rest of you who are in Pennsylvania, you know I'm a Pennsylvania attorney, our governor spoke recently, and he specifically gave some additional things like we are social distancing, which I like because I don't like all these people touching me anyway. But we also have Montgomery County, which is just a county over from us, where I also practice, is largely closed, meaning the malls are closed, the schools are closed, and now even the courts are closed, except for some essential things done in smaller areas. They've asked for a Supreme Court dictate that this is an emergency so they can actually postpone trials. While this may not mean much for those of you in civil trials, this definitely means something for criminal trials, which means that for people who are incarcerated, the DAs, the public defenders, and all others should be working on how to get nonviolent offenders out of prison right now so that they can be quarantined safely at home if it's a nonviolent offense. But for those of us who are not dealing with criminal matters but are dealing with custody matters, something new comes up. Right now, people have custody orders that say the child is supposed to be with parent A from this period to this period, and parent B from this period to this period. And there are a lot of things that come up. One, what happens if schools are closed? Well, here's an important thing to think about. If schools are closed and you are the primary parent, generally you are the one used to making all the arrangements. However, because you may have to work and perhaps the other parent doesn't, or one of you may work at, say, a hospital or some other essential way, the parents have to understand that even though the custody order is meant to be followed at all times, during a crisis, such as a pandemic, if there's an official quarantine, if there is an emergency order, it is time for you to get sensible about your custody. If you know you don't know what to do when the kid is sick, for instance, don't call up the other parents saying, I know I only get them once a month, but it's my day, give me my child. If you know, for instance, that the other parent is perfectly capable of doing everything that you do and the child is going to be absolutely safe, instead of saying you were only supposed to have Thursdays and Fridays every other week, suggest that since you have off on Wednesday and the child is going to have off of school, please keep the child from Wednesday through Friday. Or you may want to consider whether you are in the vulnerable populations where the child needs to shelter in place in one home or the other. So for instance, let's say dad lives with and takes care of his mother who is elderly. The child may primarily live with mom. We may decide that because the child has been in public school and because the child is exposed to a petri dish full of germs, that we may need to suspend visits with dad for a period of time so that we don't cause harm to grandma. Remember, though children are not the most vulnerable position in this virus, the elderly and those with compromised immune systems are. What does that mean? That means that we try to keep them away from even their grandchildren because they may be carrying the virus that does not affect the child but may affect the adults. If you are in a situation, for instance, where maybe you have primary custody but the other parent is not working, you may want to consider whether the non-working parent should be where the child is quarantined. If you have to go in and out, if you work in a hospital, for instance, you may be exposed to a number of things, and it may be better if your child is actually quarantined at the other home. Please be flexible on these things during the crisis. Also, put them in writing, put them in text, put them in email, makes sense. I know there are going to be some judges who don't think very well. We know that. So some of the judges are going to say, well, I don't care if it was a COVID-27. I say Thursday and Friday is this parent, you give them to them. And yes, on some level you do that, but you put your child's safety first and you use your common sense. So put it in writing and say, I'm not going to deny you any of your time. I'm going to make up all time as needed. However, little Junior has a cough. You live in a household with someone who is vulnerable. Perhaps your significant other has a compromised immune system. I'm going to keep little Junior here for a period of 2 weeks while little Junior's temperature, until little Junior's temperature is stable, for instance. Okay? Also, really think about what is appropriate. I know there are some people who have varying beliefs about science and varying beliefs about what the child, I want the child only to have vitamin C, don't give him medication. Now is not the time to play those games. If one person is refusing to give a child medication when they need it or something like that, that is an emergency situation where you should contact your lawyer and say, I want to deny visits because my child is in danger. I'm willing to take those cases. I am willing to make it, but there's a way that we do it. We don't just snatch a child from school and refuse to give them back. we make sure that we document it, and we do it in a way that is the least restrictive way that is going to ensure the safety of everyone involved. Now, I don't want us to all be jumping on the COVID-19 bandwagon and start making a bunch of, ridiculous announcements and predicaments. Of course, we don't want to do that. But what we do want to do is we want to be as smart about this as possible. We want to be as thoughtful about this as possible. We want to be as prepared for this as possible. Now, some of you are also petty. I know I have a touch of the petty. Okay, so we know I have a touch of the petty, but when it comes to children, you can't let that overtake you. Why do I say that? My daughter has severe anxiety and hypochondria in a lot of ways about this. She's very concerned about her immune system, which I've told her is healthy. She's concerned about mine because I have a chronic illness, and she is concerned that her sister is not behaving appropriately because she's going to get me sick, and then what happens if I die? I need to manage her expectation level. So I do have a lot of Lysol wipes, and I have them here in the office, as you've seen. I've told you our policy is to disinfect after every client comes in, to prefer Zoom meetings if at all possible, or telephone conferences. And every time I come from court, I also disinfect, not only because I want to keep myself safe, but because it makes my daughter feel more secure. If you have a child that has anxieties or issues, share your resources, okay? Don't say you can't go to your dad's because your dad doesn't have Lysol. Like, send the Lysol with the dad if you need to. Help the child manage their anxiety. Try to communicate with one another as parents, even if it's something you have difficulty doing. Leave a little bit of the pettiness at home. You're right. The other parent does not take care of the child the way you do. You're right. The other parent does not understand the child the way you do. You are right. Now that you are right, let's protect the child by giving them what they need, even when they're at the other parent's house. Okay? Now, if school is canceled, and that is looking like a very real possibility, in fact, it's going on in Montgomery County for those of you watching right now, you need to have a plan for where the child is going to be. If the child is going to be in a daycare, and it may be a home daycare somewhere, or having someone watch somewhere, it's not a lot of kids, a lot of people, please be prepared to kick in extra money to allow the child to be cared for. I'm speaking to the parents right now who pay child support. I understand that you pay child support. I understand that this is something. But if there has to be an additional $100, $200 paid because now the child has to be there all day, unless you are prepared to keep the child all day, split that cost with the other parent. Please be reasonable. We should not be in support court next month saying I had $700 in additional child care expenses and the other party wouldn't help me during an epidemic. It's not smart. It doesn't help you in custody court, and quite frankly, it doesn't help your child. So what I really need everyone to do right now is to be very sensible. As I said, be less petty. Be sensible about when to take the child, when not to take the child. Be sensible about how to handle the exchanges, and make sure you put that in writing. If you have questions, I'm going to talk a few more minutes, but if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in now so that I can answer your questions while we're talking. Now, some other things to think about. If you are the one who is experiencing illness, like you have a dry cough, you have a fever, you may be experiencing some sort of symptoms, that is also a time where you ask to suspend your visitation with the child so that you can make sure that you are okay. Now, if you are the other parent, that is not the time to be petty and call me and say, well, he forfeited his visit because he couldn't do it. Remember, we are in a global pandemic. The World Health Organization has demanded that we treat this as a pandemic, and I think it is only smart. Here in Pennsylvania, our governor has already said that we are in the midst of a health crisis. So during times like this, you do not want to be in court in a couple of months where the judge says, well, why didn't you give him back those 2 days? And you say, well, because he gave them up because of the corona. Or as I call it, the Heineken. I mean, some beer. So at any rate, just remember that in a time like this, be compassionate, be loving. Remember your children are watching you. They're learning from you how to respond when there's a difficult situation. They're learning from you whether they're more important, whether they're more important than your hatred for the other parent. And that's really, really the way to go, is to think about your child first. So I will continue to update you as time goes on about things that are happening with this global pandemic and things that are happening with whether or not there have been any changes to courts, any changes to visitation, any changes to how this process is working. But maybe we will talk as well about if you are not working because of this global pandemic, how we can deal with child support and how best to protect you and your children during this crisis. I am hopeful that the president will come up with some money and allow for the expansion of Medicaid during this time period, because there will be a lot of people not working, and we want to make sure that children and those who are in need have health care. It protects us all. So that's my word for today. Again, I'm Jackie Jones of Jones & Associates Law PC, your family fixer. And today and always, be safe, be thoughtful, and we'll be thinking about you, so think about one another as well. Have a great day.